Let's get you some more reaction on that speech. Democratic Alliance leader John Steenhuisen joins us now from Cape Town. Thank you so much for your time this evening, John. A lot of what the President spoke of tonight wasn't a complete surprise. Your immediate thoughts in reaction to what the President announced just a short while ago?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, and good evening to you and to the viewers. Yeah, no surprise really, but I'd certainly welcome. I think that going into the election season, it's going to make it a lot easier to campaign. Good news that the infection rate is down, but obviously we've got to keep up with ensuring the protocols are maintained and that we try and get as many people vaccinated as possible so that we can start to move the country back to some form of normality going forward. I think the one thing that's missing, though, and it's something that we need to start asking for, and certainly we've done so in the form of a written question to the presidency, is what are the criteria for us to be able to exit the state of disaster? We've been in a state of disaster now for almost 2 years. We need to understand from government, what is our job as citizens? What targets do you want us to hit for us to get out of the state of disaster and to start to get life back to some form of normality? And I think that government's going to have to pretty soon come up with those metrics about what are we targeting, what are we trying to hit as citizens, so that we can work together to achieve those and start to return to some form of normality.
Now, the Democratic Alliance has very much been banging the drum, rather, for businesses, for restaurants, and the tourism industry, for these regulations to be eased so that we can get even more people back to work and get people moving around so that we can get the economy moving. What do you think we'll achieve with adjusted level 2? Why not go to adjusted level 1? We heard that from Busa in the lead up to the speech, that they were thinking, why not go to adjusted level 1? The economy needs it. Your stance on that?
I agree completely with that. That's why I say we need to understand exactly what we need to do to get out of this Groundhog Day of endless lockdowns and moving between these levels. Look, we've got 44% unemployment rate in South Africa, now the highest unemployment rate in the world. We've got less investment coming into South Africa and more investment leaving. And with that, the jobs are going with them. And I think that we need to understand, as I've said right from the beginning, that this was always a battle about lives and livelihoods, and that there's an intrinsic link between poverty and higher death rates and the incidence of dreaded disease. And so I think that we need to understand that it is about balancing those lives and livelihoods. The economy has taken a massive battering. And the sooner we can get to some form of normality and some form of certainty, the better it's going to be for business to be able to plan ahead and to start the revival. The longer we stay in this uncertainty of lockdowns and the state of disaster, it's going to be very, very difficult for business to plan ahead around that.
How important is accountability in the business sector? The President has said they will review some of the measures in 2 weeks' time. I often thought that during a lockdown, it's like we're stuck in a really bad group project at school, whereas everybody gets a really bad mark just because one person doesn't perform. Do you think that there's been enough done to keep businesses accountable who are not sticking to the regulations, so that not everybody suffers when we have to go back to a higher level of lockdown?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, as I said, there's a compact between government and its citizens, and business is a player in that compact. And that's why it's very important in a compact that everybody knows what the parameters that they are operating in and what their role is. And so I think if we're able to give business and citizens and religious organizations and civil society a target to reach, and we know where we're trying to get, I think it's going to make compliance, and I think it's going to make adherence a lot better, because there's an incentive then on business, there's an incentive on citizens to work towards hitting those targets. At the moment, we don't know what it's going to take for government to take us out of the state of disaster or the sort of Groundhog Day of lockdowns. And we're going to stay in this, and I think your analogy is very good, this group work project, not knowing what the pass mark is. And I think that it's very important that we do as citizens have that, and governments upfront about it.
Just before I let you go, my colleague spoke to Professor Mahdi, a virologist with Wits, very well known during this lockdown, and he said he'd hoped that political parties will use this election time, because now with gatherings being allowed, or bigger gatherings being allowed, election campaigning will be a little bit easier as well. And he's hoping that political parties will use those platforms to encourage more of their supporters to get vaccinated. How are you approaching this as a party, and how do you also approach the fact that in various parties there will be people who are fearful of getting vaccinated, and there will be anti-vaxxers as well?
Well, look, I mean, I've had the vaccination. I believe that vaccinating and getting as many people vaccinated as possible is the pathway to normality again, and we've seen this in the United Kingdom. But I think that we need to be very careful when we start talking about mandatory vaccinations. I think that gets people's backs up. I don't support that, and I don't think it's constitutional either. There's a right to bodily integrity. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and I think that anybody who doesn't want to be vaccinated, well, that's their personal choice. I happen to believe in the vaccination process. I happen to believe that the more people we can get vaccinated, the sooner we can get back to some form of normality. And as I said, there's cases where this is very clearly the thing. The UK is almost returned to normal. Many other countries where they've reached the critical stage of vaccination have done so. But I think government would make a terrible mistake if it was to make vaccines mandatory, because I think they'll be infringing on people's rights. I think what government needs to do is to start upping its communication strategy around the efficacy of the vaccine and why it's important to vaccinate. I think that they've allowed far too much space on particularly social media and other platforms for people who are peddling fake news and other things around vaccines to prevail. So I think government's got to get a lot more aggressive in its communication with citizens, rather than holding out the spectre of mandatory vaccines. I believe in freedom of choice, and I think that it's any person's right to decide what they will or will not do with their own body. I don't think it's a government's right to tell people what they shall and shall not do with their body. But as someone who's taken the vaccine, I certainly would be encouraging as many people to do so.
Okay, thank you. John Steenhuisen, he's the leader of the Democratic Alliance, giving us their response to the president's speech a short while ago. Now,